I think that hope is a teenage version of a wish. But then when it grows into faith, there's something solid that becomes that sort of vehicle that takes you into whatever it is that God's doing. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and don't lean on your own understanding and acknowledge him in all your ways. He will direct your path. You start saying no to the fear. In Jesus' name, go away, and then hold on to the hope and bravely and humbly take the next step forward and pretty much know that you're going to hit obstacles. That's the start. That's the beginning. That's where one step will lead to another. I'm Robin Jones Gunn, the author of the Christy Miller Series, and I share hope.
Welcome to I Share Hope, the podcast where world leaders share their real stories of hope and how you can use actionable hope to start changing your life today. And now, here's your host, Chris Williams.
So, Robin, you've been just so instrumental in my girl's life. Actually, the books, the Christy books, we have a copy here at our house that is signed by, I think, my wife, her sister, and now 2 daughters of mine. I'm wondering if there's an aunt or a mom in there somewhere as well. Anyway, these books have been passed down, and now we have way more than they started with. And you've just been so powerful in the way you've written stories to engage, at least girls. I don't know if you have stories for boys as well. I wasn't reading that stuff. I hardly read it all when I was a kid and on that kind of thing. I'm a really slow reader. But the stories have communicated so much good belief systems, both from a Christian standpoint and from just pure moral activity and the way to think through life. It's been great, and I'm thrilled to talk to you today. So, Robin Jones Gunn is with us, and wow, tell us more about where you're at, what you're doing, and then I'll ask you our 5 questions of hope. I know your time is valuable.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this as well, because when you first told me that it was a multi-generational group of readers that had connected with these stories, I thought that has to be God. That's just a unique, and it's the sort of thing that, as a writer,
Robin, I just lost you for a minute. You still there?
I stand back with you and go, it's amazing.
So, Robin, I lost you for a second there. The audio did cut out for a minute, but you were saying the multi-generational part of that has to be God. So go back to there. It cut out for about 15 seconds. I want to make sure I get that.
Yeah, I think that as any writer would hope that something would appeal and apply to different generations, or that the books would stay in print for 25 years, you can kind of hope for that, but there's no way to figure out how to do that. And so that's why I stand back with you and just say, I'm in awe of what God has done with the Christy Miller books. And I can't explain it. I couldn't teach anyone how to do that, because just God did that.
Wow. That's great to hear. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And everybody that I talk to that tries to write a book, and I'm not one of those, never tried and not sure I ever could, but they're looking for the formula to do what you've done. And I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. There's sometimes a formula for certain things, but this one, I think God wanted to get those books in people's hands. So,
yep.
Robin, you do a lot of things professionally. Give me a little bit of a background of what you're doing. You obviously have written a lot, but you speak all over the place. So tell me what you're doing right now professionally, and how you're getting your message out continually.
Right now, the fun surprise was that I started writing more about these characters, Christy and Todd, in their married years. And it just was last year that the first married years book came out, and I'm working on the 3rd one right now. That will be out in August of 2015. So again, that felt like a really fun surprise. The opportunity was there, and I jumped back in with these characters and found that I really missed them, and it was so great to be back with them, like a reunion. So it's been really, really fun to write. And then there's another fun project that has just begun, and that is a book that my grown daughter, who's married and lives just down the street from us, that she and I are starting to work on together, a book for mothers and daughters. And that's just because of all of the opportunities she and I have been having lately to speak together or to be called upon to say, how did you do this when your daughter was this age? So that's in the early works, but that's a mother-daughter book that Rachel and I are working on.
Wow.
And then this is probably the funnest and most unexpected thing is that just last week, my agent called, and some Christmas novellas that I wrote, Finding Father Christmas is the first one, that Hallmark is put them into production as a movie for 2016 at Christmas time.
No way.
So and I probably even shouldn't say anything yet because it's still in the works, and I know you're supposed to wait until it's actually in the can and they have an air date set, but it's all so far along in motion that it really looks like it's God's doing. It's going to happen.
Amazing.
But yeah, so
wow.
That's kind of fun. And the best call was with the producer just 2 days ago when she said, well, the plan right now is to film in England, and we would like you to come on set for 3 days. So you'll have to go to England. Oh, okay.
I think I can work that out.
So it's all just happening, and that's really an answer to prayer in so many ways because of the interest of the readers over the years in writing and saying, why aren't your books in movies? I'm going to pray that something happens. We need more movies like this. And you can have, as I have, many conversations with producers and directors and film companies, but unless the Lord opens the door, it's just kind of knocking here and knocking there and not getting anywhere. And this was out of the blue and unexpected, and so it feels like it's going to be a ride. It's going to be a roller coaster ride, so we'll see what happens.
I love that. I love that it's the one you weren't going after. You know, that happens in my life too. The things that I'm tracing and tracking and following and figuring out how to do that, they seem to be the hardest things to do, and the ones that just fall in your lap are the ones that work the best. Huh.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, Robin Jones Gunn, I can't wait to hear the answers to these 5 questions we ask every guest. So we're interviewing 1,000 people around the globe that are representing world populations. So every 8 million people, in theory, would have one person speaking for them. Now, that's really hard to do from a true everybody gets a voice. But nonetheless, we're being very, very careful to try to do our best to pick that group of people that represents the world population. So I'm thrilled you're here, and I want to ask question 1. What is your definition of hope, or your favorite quote about hope?
Well, I'm still there thinking about all the people I'm representing and hope I speak well on their behalf. But for hope, that word has been very special over the years because it carries the weight of faith with it. Because hope begins sometimes when there's just a dream or a wish, but that next step then is just sinking your faith into what is God doing and what is He asking me to do right now, so that hope is turned from just being this wispy, it would be great if this would all come to be, to trusting in God and having faith in His plan. And so I think that hope is that grown-up version of a wish, but then maybe it's like a teenage version of a wish. But then when it grows into faith, there's something solid that becomes that sort of vehicle that takes you into whatever it is that God's doing.
That's a really interesting progression. I've never heard somebody say that. So if a wish is the most childlike version of this, then hope could be the teenage version, and faith the grown-up version. Wow.
And I'd never thought that till this minute, but I think that the reason it resonates is because the teenage version, there's so many ups and downs, but there's also so much pure joy and all the possibilities because of that youthfulness that's locked into that season of life, so that hope is infused with a whole lot more determination and energy than just a wish. But then to get it to the deadline, it grows into faith.
Wow, you're right. I've never thought it through that way. That is so true, though. There is a difference between a teenager and an adult in so many ways that we look and dream and think ahead. And it seems like the pressures of the world as we grow up knock a little bit of that out, and it really does take more faith and more determination and more solidness to that hope to carry it through.
Yeah.
Wow. Question number 2 then is, who has shared the most hope with you?
The person that has shared the most hope with me would have to be my husband. And the interesting thing about that, we've been married 38 years, and what Ross has done is equivalent to putting wheels on that hope, in that when I thought, oh, I can't do this, I don't know what I'm doing, he has always been the one to propel me further, to move me on. And a lot of times I didn't like it. At the very beginning, he saw that I needed to go to a writer's conference to learn all the steps involved in becoming a writer. And I was content to just write poems in my journal and just leave it at that. So when he set it up for me to go to a writer's conference and just pressed, I was really angry. I was out of my comfort zone. I felt like, why are you pushing me so hard? But it is because of that sense of the depth of his love for me, and to move me forward, to have that involvement. And I'm so grateful now. But yeah, definitely, he's the one. He did it.
You know, I'm hearing you say that, and I'm thinking, my wife's name is Jill. I'm thinking, how in the world, if she's an aspiring writer or a novice and getting into it, how in the world would I broach the subject? So, babe, I think maybe we need to get you to a conference.
Absolutely. That was really the most propelling experience, because I was in that community of writers where I met real live editors and publishers and other writers, and I could just sit at the meals and absorb all of their input of how they were figuring out what was next for them. And that was a lot more valuable, the real life face-to-face conversations, than any how-to book, or maybe even a blog or something that we have now. Back then, we didn't have those things. I just had a few books to read on how to write or how to get published. But it's so different when it's life upon life instead of just concept upon dream. It's just, so yes, you need to get Jill to a conference.
She's not a writer currently. I was just trying to think, how do you broach the subject with your spouse to say, you need help? It's a really brave thing. And I'm going a second step with that. It's a brave thing to do that. And it wasn't an addiction or a big set of choices in life that was leading you down a dark path. And yet, there's something to learn there for people who are trying to grow. Sometimes the bravest thing to do is to step in there and help them do something or take the next step. And if it's a hard thing you have to mention, sometimes that's the best thing you can do. Like your husband did. He stepped into something that could have been a hard conversation with you feeling like, he didn't like your writing or whatever, but it really was awesome. And there's a lot of people who do that with people who may be going through an addiction or something. They have to say, you need to go get some help. And even if you're going to get mad at me, I want to walk through it with you.
That's a really interesting comparison, because it's true. We usually are so more compelled to help when we see something negative, but then it's odd when we see something positive in another person. And what I think Ross recognized was there was something there that needed to be developed, but I was too fearful and intimidated to take the next step on my own. And that's, yeah, like I said, same kind of reaction. Like, why are you pushing me to do this? This
Yeah.
is wait till I feel confident enough that this is something I want to do. But see, that season of life, Ross was a youth pastor for 25 years, and so the first maybe 5-8 years of our marriage, being so involved in youth ministry, he continued to see how I was sitting down with the girls and just telling them stories and giving them examples, and that always being that storyteller wasn't going to go away. It was something that just needed to be sanctified, and it needed to be dedicated to the Lord, and then it needed to be directed, so that it was this latent sort of gift that he saw. There's something you need to be responsible to do for that. And of course, now looking back, that I've been writing for 30 years, that it in living in Hawaii, we have a word here that makes so much sense, and it's kuleana. It's such a beautiful word, kuleana, and it simply means your responsibility based on how you're gifted. And so that's where I think Ross saw that, like, without even knowing the Hawaiian word, that was my kuleana. Like, with my life, this is not going to go away. This is a gift, and so I need to be. How can I step forward and be responsible to develop that gift? Nobody else can do this the way that I can do this. So I need to be embracing what God has done and responsible to take the next steps for it. I just talked to and just one more thought on that, Cris, is that I just feel like there's so many people that they cannot see the gift because it's right there and it feels natural to them. So especially in my case, of course I tell stories. That's all I do. And as a matter of fact, when I was growing up, I got in trouble for telling stories. I was talking too much or embellishing too much, or, you know, it was a lying thing. Like, I could really make up a story and go somewhere, and it was not viewed in the family I grew up in as a strength. But then when I was married, he saw the gift that was hidden in that. So how can that be dedicated to the Lord and purified and sanctified and then used to further his kingdom? And that's what happened.
Wow. So I learned something from every one of these interviews. I feel like the luckiest guy in the world sometimes, because people like you are willing to spend 30 minutes with me. And you know, listening to podcasts, I love listening to everybody else's podcasts too. And there's so much we learn from real life stories, and I'm really kind of pulling 2 pages out of these 2 books, the Ross book and then the Robin book. And one is being brave and making sure that if somebody around me that I love and respect is needing a prod forward or a push forward for whatever reason, you know, I don't want to get in their business and be nosy, but if it's appropriate, there may be a way to bless someone else by saying, you've got this, take the next step, you can do this. And then the page from the Robin book so far is I'm hearing you and I'm listening and thinking through my own life, and there's a decision that I've been thinking through that I know is a direction my heart wants to go and I'm gifted in, and honestly I'm just scared to death to do it and to pursue that goal. And so you're pushing me down the road a little farther.
Because it's your kuleana, Cris. So you don't be afraid, because nobody else can do it the way you can. And you take that first step. Again, the faith. Go from being a teenager with all that hope and just step into maturity and be in that adult realm with that dream, so that it can be fully dedicated to the Lord, sanctified, and used to further his kingdom. That's what we were created to do. I think that when we let fear start making all the decisions for us, that we fall into this trap that all the other decisions are already taken care of, because we made this one big decision of no because we were too afraid of it. And then there's other little things that come our way, and it's easy to go, oh no, and no to that, and no to that, and no to that. But when you just, you know, God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but power and love and discipline or a sound mind. And so that step in going, okay, I'm afraid. Where did that come from? Did that come from God? No. Okay, what did come from him? This growing wish that's become a hope. Now, how is it going to turn from that dreamy state into a walk of faith? And that's your kuleana. That's where I'm excited for you, because it's terrifying, and then it becomes just so invigorating because you see what God is doing, and you go, I could never have done that. I could never open that door. That's the life. That's the abundant life right there.
All right. Well, you're doing great leading into question 3, because the thing is, so I am scared. I mean, that's the honest truth, and you're nailing it around the head. But I'm scared because there's been a lot of other things that have gone on back there that have, that have taken the hope away, and or at least made me where I'm pretty skittish to hope. So question 3 for you is, tell us a time and kind of paint the picture and the story around what happened in your life one time when you really lost a lot of hope, or really had to pull through something that was crazy hard, and it challenged your belief in where you thought you could go. Not just a writer, but whatever example you want to give in life. How'd you get through that? What happened, and how'd you get through it?
Well, the reason this is such a great question is because this is so typical of anyone that I've ever talked to, that, the beauty of getting older, you look back and say, how did you get to where you are? But this same thing that you're setting up here has happened in every single person I've talked to, that you think you know what it is that you are going to accomplish, or what you're going to be about, or how God's leading you. And you start that way and the doors close, and you feel the sense of defeat that comes with failure. And that's where a lot of people get stuck. But then when it's taking that next step in trusting God in a new way and following the path and the doors that he opens, then it's this whole other form of the original dream. And I guess the best way to give an example is that when I was in high school, and I'd given my life to Christ when I was 12 at summer camp, and we had a really great Bible church, and I loved hearing missionary stories, and I knew when I was 16 that I wanted to be a missionary. I could not think of any other way to serve the Lord. I went on missions trips to Mexico. When I was in college, I went to Europe, and I smuggled Bibles behind the Iron Curtain, and this was my dream, to get God's word to people who would not otherwise hear about his love. And so I applied to stay on with the mission in Europe, and I was rejected. I had gone to a Bible college, and I got engaged to a man that I loved there, and he broke the engagement and rejected me. And I went to Urbana, this great missions conference, and in all of these kind of shattered dream mode of how can I become a missionary? What do I need to do? I have to get to this conference so I can find out how to be a missionary. And what I did was fill out the form ahead of time, as they ask you to do, and list all my gifts and abilities and education and interests. And I hadn't finished college yet. So it was just a scramble of pieces. They put all that into the computer to match up my abilities with openings for missions around the world. So I arrive at Urbana just expecting this is going to be it. I'm going to find out God's will for my life, how I can be a missionary. And the printed paper was handed to me from the brave computer that, figured out what I should do. And here was the answer. I was to be a laundry supervisor in Nairobi, Kenya. Not exactly what I expected, but all right, then off to Africa I go. And I was teaching a Sunday school class for teenage girls at the time. I came back from Urbana, and I told them, oh, girls, pray for me. I'm going to Africa. I'm going to get a big basket and put it on my head. I'm going to walk down to the river. I'm going to wash clothes for Jesus. And they just said, why? Why don't you stay here and just keep teaching us about women in the Bible and just keep telling us stories? And I just thought that was a waste of a life. And so I waited for the letter, and it came from the mission, and I was rejected again. No, we don't see you as being a good fit for this position. And that was such a humbling and leveling, and that's where all the fear starts to brew, doesn't it? It starts to like really just bubble in you in those times of, I thought I was doing what I was supposed to do. This has been on my heart for years. This dream keeps dying and dying and dying. And all that rejection, which really only helps us to relate to our Savior, and that's our depth of humility that comes from that, is very important in the sanctification process, I think. So then I ended up marrying Ross, which was the best thing ever, and loved doing youth ministry. So because he was a youth pastor, that just seemed like, okay, well then, this is, if I can't be a missionary, at least I can motivate some of these teenagers to go be missionaries, or I can be a good wife and a good mother, because that's a really high calling. And so when I adjusted that way and really, really humbled out, it was during a camping trip with those teenage girls in our youth group that this prodding to start writing down stories started to grow. And those girls were relentless. We want you to write books for us. We'll tell you what to write. Let's meet every week. Tell us your stories. And they wanted a romance story. They wanted it about a surfer boy and an average girl. And that's how the very first Christy Miller book came to be, with those teenage girls on my heels. So it took 2 years to write the first book with all of their critique and input. And that book, the first one, was rejected 10 times. But it was those girls that just kept going and were just so insistent. And after that first book came out finally, it was published by Focus on the Family originally in 1988, one of their first books that they published when they started their publishing division. And I had no idea that that was all along God's purpose. That's what he created me to do. But when that first letter came from a girl who said, as a result of reading your book, I've given my life to Christ, I saw this little glimmer of hope again, right there, that hope, that roller coaster hope, that I was being a missionary. But it wasn't that I was going around the world, but that it was these stories were going to go around the world. So now fast forward to 26 years later, that these books are translated in other languages. There's millions of copies sold. As a result, I've been invited to speak in public high schools in Brazil and in Finland. And I have been able to go around the world. And the sweetest thing that God did was 3 years ago, this opportunity came for me to speak in Nairobi, Kenya. And so I went to Nairobi and taught at a conference and taught writers from around the world how to write stories that would be applicable to their generation and their culture. It's just this huge full circle. And I just get so choked up because there have been hundreds and hundreds of letters from girls around the world who've come to know Christ. And I met some at that conference in Kenya. And after the conference, I went with one of these young women from Africa, and she took me on this trip, and we were going down the road, and there were women by the river washing clothes. And it was that full circle moment of, that's not what I was created to do. It was the stories. It was being obedient to that next step to refine those stories. And anyways, there it is in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It's a great story, and
you don't think it is what it is.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's honest, and it really, you went through so many cycles there of hoping, and then having circumstances or someone or something in your head or whatever tell you no, and slap your hand and you pull back, and you do it again, you slap your hand, you pull back, and that process beats us down and says you can't. And I love how your wishing has turned to hope, and your hoping has turned to faith in your progression there, and you're you've grown up. I mean, obviously you have grown up as an author for sure. You're beloved all over the world, but you've grown up in the strength and the stamina of your hope through the hard times. And without those, you wouldn't have that strength, you know?
Yeah, so exactly what you're feeling right now with the fear of whatever it is next. The funny thing is, whatever that picture that you have in your mind of, okay, this is where I'm headed, this is the end result, this is the goal I'm going after, you will find that by taking the next step toward that, you will hit obstacles, you will be rejected, you'll be downtrodden. But all of those are recalibrating events to put you on this windy path where you will get to that goal that you can see. But when you turn around and look back, you'll think, whoa, I never thought I'd get there this way. I had this nice straight path figured out, and I was getting thwarted along the way. So the full circle, I mean, even the hurts and rejections. Just last month I was speaking at a writer's conference, and someone came up afterwards and said, I'm so glad that you shared that little bit about how you were in college and engaged and you thought you were seeking God's will, and then he broke up with you and said he didn't love you, and and she just talked about that rejection piece because it was similar to what she had just gone through. And she said, when I read your Christy Miller books, I knew that you understood the depth of that pain when you're young and you're in love and it hurts so bad. And it was just that aha moment of, Lord, thank you for letting me experience that in real life so that as I wrote, it would just be part of what came out naturally. And that's what's happening to you too, Cris, that there's things that are just so frustrating right now, but that's building in you this deeper empathy, and it'll come out later in whatever that faith journey becomes, so that you're more real along the way. It's kind of a mystery. It's kind of amazing how it happens.
It is. I like real too. We always connect to that better. Well, you're doing amazingly well here. I wish I had like 3 hours because we'd get a lot of good stuff. So, question 4. How are you sharing hope today? And I don't just mean in going to the conference and being a public speaker and an author and, a movie set coming up and all these things. More, what do you do in your community, your neighborhood, the ones that you can personally reach out to and touch? How do you share hope on a daily basis?
Where my strength is with young women is having these small gatherings so that we can open up and talk and be real. And I think that there's been the most hope sharing opportunities when I've met with these different groups of girls. I'm starting up another group this summer, and this group is going to be women in their 20s, all of them single, and we're going to go through a book that I wrote with Tricia Goyer called Praying for Your Future Husband. Now there's some hope. Like, this is what we're going to do, is go through this book and just be deliberate about praying about your future husband. And they will find as they go through the book that the process is really to prepare their heart for whatever it is that God has for them. Because by surrendering in that whole area of their future romance and love, that they become more receptive to what it is that God has for them. So the hope that's shared in these small groups is the kind of input that can happen in a much deeper way than just passing out a book. Here, go home and read this book. Let's talk about this book. Let's talk about how you feel about the stage of life that you're in relation to these verses and the words on this page. And I guess I'd have to say that the ways that over the years, but especially right now, that there are opportunities to give hope, it's in those smaller groups. It's different than like standing on a stage and casting a vision, but it's just life upon life, and listening to all the ups and downs and praying together and being in that community. I don't know any other way for it to, as you said, real is good. We like real, but there's no other way for it to be real unless take the time to really relate to another person's life. And that's when the fellowship really takes you to the next step.
You're on to the next question, which is perfect tie-in. So how can I and the people listening with me, how can we take steps to grow as a person of hope or share more hope? Either way you want to go there. Like just the 1, 2s, 3s, the ABC kind of steps. Super simple. What's next? What do we start with?
I think it is with saying, fear, you have to go away. You can't be part of this journey, because fear and hope in the same room, it's a cat fight always. And who's going to win? It's the one that you feed the most, right? If you just keep feeding those fears. But if you feed the hope and you trust in the Lord with all your heart and don't lean on your own understanding and acknowledge him in all your ways, he will direct your paths. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, he promises us that. So there's that place where you just get brave and say, I'm not going to give in to the fear. I'm going to take a step of faith. That's why we call it a step of faith, I guess. And that's where you're moving from that teenage hope season into, I'm going to grow up now and take this step of faith. And be intentional about what it is that is just rumbling around in you and won't go away, so that it becomes something. Because I'm trying to make it general to whatever that hope is, and that wish, that dream, how it grows up, but that it becomes something that really has the strength to go on. I guess I should back up and just say, it seems that if you start saying no to the fear, in Jesus' name, go away, and then hold on to the hope and bravely and humbly take the next step forward, and pretty much know that you're going to hit obstacles, that's the start. That's the beginning. That's where one step will lead to another.
That's good. That is great. So really feeding the hope more than the fear, and figuring out which is which, and pursuing the hope, and then that determination to go forward, even though we're all grown-ups here, or some of us listening, and even the kids know we have our hard days, and you can still move forward. No, it's going to be difficult sometimes, but continue pursuing, continue feeding the hope, continue getting back up on your feet, dusting yourself off, and getting back with it. Wow.
Yeah. And that's where, as you were saying, like, well, maybe you need to get to a writer's conference. Well, that's where hope's going to grow. And if you pack fear in your suitcase and bring it along, then you might end up in your room crying most of the time. But if you don't, it's just a lot of growing up for all of us, because that means we're going to be brave and we're going to try new things and not be so concerned. Oh, what if I fail? What if you fail? Go figure it out. Go make your own disasters. Just do something. Just start.
That's a good point. Okay. Well, Robin, right around here, we take kind of a break away from the official interview. So my sentence I'm saying right now won't be in the interview. So we need a few audio clips of your quote about hope. Every episode starts with, and we'll find this, some quote in the interview that's just kind of sets up the story well. And then that quote ends with, I'm Robin Jones Gunn and I share hope, or I'm Robin Jones Gunn, the author of the Christy Miller Series, and I share hope. Basically your name and I share hope, and anything you want to put in the middle that describes you. So I'll be quiet for a second. You fire a few of those off, and we'll see if we get the right one.
And all you need is just that line that starts with "I'm Robin Jones Gunn,"
Just so
or
your
do you
name
need
and I
a
share
quote
hope is in
on
the
hope
middle.
as
Yeah.
well?
Your name and I share hope, and anything else in the middle is fine with me.
Oops, I lost you for a second there. Please
Oh,
say that again.
okay. Yeah. Your name. So if it was me, I would say, I'm Chris Williams and I share hope. Or I'm Chris Williams, the host of I Share Hope and I share hope. But your name and I share hope is the important part. And then anything in the middle that you would like to say that identifies who you are or your place in life is fine. Some people put that in there, some people
Perfect.
don't.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Yeah.
Okay, I'll be quiet and you can fire away.
Okay. I'm Robin Jones Gunn, the author of the Christy Miller Series, and I share hope.
I think you got that on the first try. Nice. Excellent. Well, Robin, at this point, let me ask you a few questions because there's always stuff that pops in my head that I love to tag on at the end of these interviews. So I generate questions in my head like a 3-year-old. It's kind of ridiculous, but it's fun to find out more stuff about your life because there's people who just want to know, what are you really doing out there? So, Robin, you're in Hawaii, and have you lived there a long time, and do you surf since you wrote about a surfer boy?
We have lived here permanently for 5 years. Before that, we came over every chance we had because my in-laws had a place here, and we actually lived here about 20 years ago for a year. I I have done all kinds of water things like paddleboard, and um, I've sat on a surfboard, and I've had fun with a boogie board, but I have not yet mastered surfing. So maybe that's the next thing. Maybe that's a little adventure waiting to happen. But I love just going in the water, and I have a special place I like to go to with my daughter. We've set up this rhythm of going on Saturdays and getting there early and just talking, and jumping in the water. And oh, it's really a sweet season of life, a really sweet opportunity to be able to do that.
That's great. All right, so you are a master storyteller, and you're telling stories that people are reading around the world, and you're still writing more stories that people are reading around the world, even to the point where they're potentially going to be in movies. Amazing. So, as a master storyteller, who do you like to read? Who tells a good story that captures your attention? Any genre.
Okay, this will surprise you because my favorite books to read are Hawaiian history, and it's been that way for over 20 years. I'm just fascinated with the way that the early missionaries came to these islands and all the stories of what happened and the ancient Hawaiian traditions. And so I have a bookshelf that's just filled and filled and filled with books on Hawaiian history. A lot of the books are out of print. It's sort of this treasure hunt to go find another rare book here and there. So I think it's because of the love that we have for this place and the desire to understand the culture and see where they've come from, but also that fascinating time in history 160 years ago when the missionaries sailed from New England and brought the gospel here. It's just unparalleled with any other little pocket in the world. But before that, so when I was maybe, high school, I was not much of a reader because I would start a novel and I'd come up with my idea of how I thought the book was going to end. I'd read the last chapter, and then I wouldn't be interested to find out. It was like I was always so involved in the storytelling process. It was difficult to just sit and enjoy the journey. There's some books that I've really loved, but that's where I didn't become much of a reader in high school. In college, just opening up this world of C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and some of the books that I had to read for classes, that's remained. And a deep love for poetry and a real keen interest in some of the Christian classics. So I have a lot of those books on my shelf too, just finding all of the great classic Christian writers and having those books and then just reading little snippets of them in quiet time is just something to meditate on and absorb a little bit.
That's wonderful.
That's it. Yeah.
That's good. All right, Robin Jones Gunn, how can we find and follow you? I know a lot of people would love to find out more what you're doing, find your books, follow you on social media. What do you have out there?
Come to my website, robingunn.com, ROBINGUNN.com. And then on the website, you'll find all the links for Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that. So it's sort of to get there. And then there's a blog on the website as well. So plenty of info.
Great. We'll do it. We'll put that in the show notes as well at isharehope.com, and a few pictures of you and links to just all this other great stuff you've got. I'm just so amazed. Well, thank you so much for your time. You've been truly a blessing to me and a blessing to my wife and my girls, and obviously millions of others just like them. So thanks for your time. Thanks for the extra more than 30 minutes you've given us today. It's been wonderful, and I am challenged, and I have a little bit of work to do now that I've talked to you. I'm not sure if I should thank you or not, but I think I should.
Yes, well, go get him. Go trust God in a new way and be amazed. Just be amazed at what he does. It'll turn out different than you ever thought, but you'll be surprised. It's exactly what you hoped.
Great. And Miss Robin Gunn, at the very end here, this is not for the audio, will you tell Jill, Allie, Kat, and Caroline hello? They would love to hear from you.
Jill, Allie, Kat, Caroline, hello. No. Aloha.
Wonderful. You're a blessing. You're just great. Thanks for your time, Robin. Enjoy Hawaii and have a beautiful sunny day over there.
Thanks, Chris. God bless you.
Same to you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've just listened to I Share Hope. If you're ready to make a change, head to our website at isharehope.com and claim your free copy of the Top 10 Actions of Hope from World Leaders to use hope in your own life. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Her sister, and now 2 daughters of mine. I'm wondering if there's an aunt or a mom in there somewhere as well. Anyway, these books have been passed down, and now we have way more than they started with. And you've just been so powerful in the way you've written stories to engage, at least girls. I don't know if you have stories for boys as well. I wasn't reading that stuff. I hardly read at all when I was a kid and on that kind of thing. I'm a really slow reader. But the stories have communicated so much good belief systems, both from a Christian standpoint and from just pure moral activity and the way to think through life. It's been great, and I'm thrilled to talk to you today. So Robin Jones Gunn is with us, and wow, tell us more about where you're at, what you're doing, and then I'll ask you our 5 questions of hope. I know your time is valuable.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this as well, because when you first told me that it was a multi-generational group of readers that had connected with these stories, I thought that has to be God. That's just a unique, and it's the sort of thing that, as a writer, I think that hope is a teenage version of a wish. But then when it grows into faith, there's something solid that becomes that sort of vehicle that takes you into whatever it is that God's doing. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and don't lean on your own understanding, and acknowledge him in all your ways. He will direct your path. You start saying no to the fear. In Jesus' name, go away, and then hold on to the hope and bravely and humbly take the next step forward, and pretty much know that you're going to hit obstacles. That's the start. That's the beginning. That's where one step will lead to another. I'm Robin Jones Gunn, the author of the Christy Miller Series, and I share hope.
Welcome to I Share Hope, the podcast where world leaders share their real stories of hope and how you can use actionable hope to start changing your life today. And now, here's your host, Chris Williams.
So, Robin, you've been just so instrumental in my girl's life. Actually, the Christy books, we have a copy here at our house that is signed by, I think, my wife.
To be called upon to say, how did you do this when your daughter was this age? So that's in the early works, but that's a mother-daughter book that Rachel and I are working on.
Wow.
And then this is probably the funnest and most unexpected thing is that just last week, my agent called, and some Christmas novellas that I wrote, Finding Father Christmas is the first one, that Hallmark is put them into production as a movie for 2016 at Christmas time.
No way.
So and I probably even shouldn't say anything yet because it's still in the works, and I know you're supposed to wait until it's actually in the can and they have an air date set, but it's all so far along in motion that it really looks like it's God's doing. It's going to happen.
Amazing.
But yeah, so
wow.
That's kind of fun. And the best call was with the producer just 2 days ago when she said, well, the plan right now is to film in England, and we would like you to come on set for 3 days. So you'll have to go to England. Oh, okay.
I think I can work that out. Robin, I just lost you for a minute. You still there?
I stand back with you and go, oh, it's amazing.
So, Robin, I lost you for a second there. The audio did cut out for a minute, but you were saying the multi-generational part of that has to be God. So go back to there. It cut out for about 15 seconds. I want to make sure I get that.
Yeah. Oh, I think that as any writer would hope that something would appeal and apply to different generations, or that the books would stay in print for 25 years, you can kind of hope for that, but there's no way to figure out how to do that. And so that's why I stand back with you and just say, I'm in awe of what God has done with the Christy Miller books. And I can't explain it. I couldn't teach anyone how to do that because just God did that.
Wow. That's great to hear. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And everybody that I talk to that tries to write a book, and I'm not one of those, never tried and not sure I ever could, but they're looking for the formula to do what you've done. And I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. There's sometimes there's a formula for certain things, but this one, I think God wanted to get those books in people's hands. So,
yep.
Robin, you do a lot of things professionally. Give me a little bit of a background of what you're doing. You obviously have written a lot, but you speak all over the place. So tell me what you're doing right now professionally and how you're getting your message out continually.
Right now, the fun surprise was that I started writing more about these characters, Christy and Todd, in their married years. And it just was last year that the first married years book came out, and I'm working on the third one right now. That will be out in August of 2015. So again, that felt like a really fun surprise. The opportunity was there, and I jumped back in with these characters and found that I really missed them, and it was so great to be back with them like a reunion. So it's been really, really fun to write. And then there's another fun project that has just begun, and that is a book that my grown daughter, who's married and lives just down the street from us, that she and I are starting to work on together, a book for mothers and daughters. And that's just because of all of the opportunities she and I have been having lately to speak together or to